Hey, good day, everybody. Especially welcome to our friends at home. My name is Brad. I'm one of the pastors here at Copper Hills, and if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I would like that opportunity. I'll be out in the plaza area after our gathering, and if you'll stop by, I would so much like to meet you. And if you're at home and we haven't met, you can send a picture of yourself. Why not? To brad@copperhills.org, and then we will have met. So 2 weeks ago, we had baptisms at each one of our 3 weekend gatherings. And if you were here at the 9 o'clock service 2 weekends ago, you would have been introduced to a man by the name of Jeff. He was baptized. He told his story of coming to faith in Jesus Christ, of surrendering his life and experiencing what everybody who's ever surrendered their life to Jesus is new spiritual life. Graced by his forgiveness and mercy and goodness, and then just a new perspective, a new look on life. And he told us his story. Well, if you were here at our 9 o'clock service last weekend, you will have experienced something else from Jeff's life. And that is that Jeff got married to Ashley in our service at 9 o'clock. That was a cool thing. Yes. So a little bit of background here. Here's the thing that happens. When Jesus comes and takes over your will and your wishes and your wants, he actually begins to transform your thinking. After Jeff was baptized, he came to me and he said, Ashley and myself would really like to get married. We share children together, share a child together, and we just think it would honor Jesus if we weren't just living together, that we made a commitment and a covenant with each other, and we did this the way he would want us to do it. We just want to be obedient to him in that. And do you think that we could maybe, just go over to the office and we could do a wedding in the office? And I said, not a chance. You're part of our family, and we're going to celebrate this choice and this decision and this covenant that you're making with one another. So I said, how about if we just do it right 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, right as the service is starting, our family will be gathered, and so that's what we did. It was a wonderful experience. If you missed it, here's a video that gets you up. You're going to make some promises this morning, but before you do, I want to ask you, are you all in?
All in.
Is this forever?
Forever.
All right. So you have written some promises and covenants for each other. Jeff, you get to go first.
Ashley, babe, I come here freely and without reservation to give myself to you so that we may join our life and mine together. As God is the center of our lives together, I will always make you the center of every day of my life and always be the man that you know and fell in love with. When you look at this ring, think of me and always remember that I love you for always and forever.
Today is a big day. In just a few moments, I'm going to be your wife, and that is something that I take very seriously. We've been a team for a while now, but today, in front of God, our children, our family, and our church, our commitment becomes a sacred one, and that makes me the luckiest girl in the world. Whether the moment is mundane or momentous, my love for you won't change. I'll be there loving you just as much as I do today, as much as I did yesterday, and as much as I will tomorrow, with my whole heart for my whole life. I love you.
So, as your pastor, I get to pronounce you husband and wife. So, you're husband and wife. Yeah. Church family, would you cheer and greet Jeff and Ashley Stevens? It was such a remarkable morning together. But what was most remarkable for me personally is to see a couple align their lives with what they really believe Jesus would want of them. To say, we want to do this not because God might bless us in some way, though he will. We want to do this because we love what Jesus has done for us and who he is, and we want to align our lives completely with him. It was a wonderful celebration. It really was. So, in light of that love story, let's talk about another love story, and that's God's great love for us. We have, as a church family, been thinking through the eyewitness account that Mark records for us, the eyewitness account of Jesus' life. We've said each week it's very likely it's Peter's eyewitness account is recorded by Mark, and you'll find it in your Bible under the Gospel of Mark or the Good News of Mark, and you can flip there if you want, or click there on your phone or your device. We're going to go to Mark chapter 14. I don't know if you know this or not, but sometimes we think that these records or these eyewitness accounts were recorded like a few years after they happened. That's not the case. This is written 35 to 40 years after the actual events. And here's what precipitated. Obviously, God's Spirit prompted it because he inspired it. But here's a real practical, logical thing. The followers, the close followers that were actually with Jesus are old now. And they're at a state of life where they're going to pass on. And so it's really important that they would write these stories and these ideas and these things that Jesus had taught. They would write them down so that you and I, a couple of thousand years, almost a couple of thousand years later, could actually have the written account of what they've written. So we're going to pick up the story in the last week of Jesus' life. Mark and Peter take about a little over half of the account to record the first 2.5 years of Jesus' life, and then the rest of the account, about 6 chapters rather, to cover 8 days of his life. So they kind of slow it down because the details of that last week are so critical. So where we're going to pick it up is Tuesday, probably sometime on Tuesday. It could be Wednesday, but most scholars and historians believe that the story we're going to pick up today is on Tuesday. On Sunday, we know that Jesus came into Jerusalem to a triumphal parade. On Monday, he comes back into the city. And there he goes to the Temple Mount. He discovers some things he doesn't really like to see. And he turns over the tables of some pop-up retail businesses, which doesn't please the religious folks, probably didn't please those merchants either. Comes back on Tuesday, and the religious leaders are waiting for him in the temple court, and he is asked to explain himself, and he does it brilliantly and magnificently. And you can record what he teaches them and how he shares with him the heartbeat that he has for them as people. They don't recognize that they're there to pin him down, is what they are. And so Tuesday night, it appears he leaves Jerusalem, the city, the walled city of Jerusalem, and he goes to a small town about 1.5 miles south through a valley and up to the top of a hill called Bethany. And that's where apparently he's been staying the last days that he's been in Israel. And so this is where we kind of pick up the story that we're going to pick up, and it's Mark chapter 14, and I'll explain a few things as we go on here. Mark 14:1 says, "It was now 2 days before Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread." Just a quick note here. The Festival of Unleavened Bread springs back all the way to Exodus chapter 12, where the nation of Israel has been captive to Israel for 400 plus years. God's going to release them from that. And the night before they depart, God says, here are some things you should do. It involves a lamb and some blood on a doorpost. You might be familiar with that. You can check back Exodus if you aren't. But he also tells them to not have any yeast in their home, to make bread without any yeast, unleavened. It's not leavened bread. And this is what they do. And so every year he instituted a festival where for 1 week there would be no leaven, there would be no yeast bread in their home. And this is the festival that they're celebrating. It's one of the pilgrimage festivals. It's all at the same time as Passover, which is that lamb, blood on the doorpost, back in Exodus. You can check that out. So this is the festival. Now here, just a quick note. It says here that it happened 2 days before that festival started. This has caused a little bit of contention with scholars because 3 of the 4 eyewitness account authors put this event in the middle of Jesus' last week, but yet record that it happens 2 days before the start of that. Does that make sense? So, though chronologically they put it in the middle, their wording indicates that it probably was before. Now, this has actually been a significant issue of concern about the veracity and the inerrancy of Scripture. It's been poked at a lot. But here's what you have to understand. I remember when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I'm trying to figure out whether the Bible is legit or not for myself. Raised in a home where I was told the Bible was legit, memorized a whole bunch of it when I was in Sunday school as a little kid. But now I'm 18, 19 years old, and I realize the faith of my parents isn't going to work for me. I have to figure it out and think it through myself. And so I'm reading it, and I see these, what looks like inaccuracies. And the more I think about it, I realize, hold on just a second. These are 4 eyewitness accounts written by 4 different people over the course of 20 years, some 30 to 35 years after the events itself, in different parts of the developed world. And they have no way to communicate with each other to check the correctness of the stories. The slight discrepancies actually caused me to go, I think that's how these things would be written. If everything was exactly the same to every little minute detail, it would make me think someone staged this, because they all got together and they all wrote the same thing. But there are no material differences in their stories. So it doesn't really matter whether it happened midweek or early week. It doesn't matter. It's amazing how clear and consistent the stories of these 4 eyewitness accounts are. So I just say that if it bothers you that there are some inaccuracies or differences, chill. It's okay. You can do your own checking on that. I guess this, you're going to come to the conclusion, those are minor and they're not a concern to you at all. So anyways, back to the story, right? Okay, here we go. Mark 14, pick it up again, verse 9. I'm going to repeat the first part. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were still looking for an opportunity. Another translation said they were scheming to capture Jesus and secretly kill him. Any of you live every day under that cloud of someone trying to kill you? Nobody. Can you imagine what that would be like? Where people are actually, that have the power, are scheming to take you out. They hate you so much that they're going to try to kill you. This is what Jesus lives under. They go on. We want to kill him, but we don't want to do it during Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. There was still a mass populace who were for Jesus, were in favor of him. It's interesting, he'll ultimately be condemned in the middle of the night when these people weren't around. And it appears that the religious leaders maybe coalesced some people who were naturally opposed to Jesus. But here they are. They're concerned about a riot, and they don't want to take Jesus out at that time. Meanwhile, Jesus is hiding out, right? He's afraid. No, Jesus is in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. Here's a historical fact that will just probably put you to sleep, but hang in with me. Bethany, which is interesting to me, I did not know this till I studied it this week. The name actually means house of sorrows or house of the poor. And historians believe that quite possibly Bethany was like a city of refuge for people who were poor and who had diseases like leprosy, which is maybe why Simon is there. It says he formerly had leprosy. Did Jesus heal him? We don't know. Did it just go away? Not likely. But this is a community, and I find it so interesting, where Jesus wants to hang out is in a city of refuge for the poor and the sick, which is so like his character, right? So that's where he is. He's hanging out, having dinner with some people there. While he was eating, reclining at a table, another passage says, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made from essence of nard. She broke open the jar and poured the perfume over his head. Okay, a little bit of information about perfume and this perfume jar. When translators take the original language and they try to put it into English, they mess it up sometimes because they're limited with the number of words they can use, because sometimes concepts would take a whole sentence and they try to shorten it down into a word or two. Okay, this is one of those examples. So what's defined here as expensive perfume made with the essence of nard actually is recorded this way. Alabaster jar of nard, pure, of great price. It's like the author, Peter and Mark, are going, okay, it was an alabaster jar of nard, but I got to tell you, it was pure. And because it was an alabaster jar of pure nard, it was really expensive. It was worth a lot of money. But to make sense of it in English, they use some extra words to describe it. Here's a picture of what the plant looks like that this comes from. It's a spikenard plant. And why does that matter? Well, it's because it doesn't actually grow naturally in Israel. It grows in Nepal and India, which would be the lands to the east. Remember the Christmas story where it says wise men came from the east? That's the region, someplace to the east where they would have this. So here's how this would work. This flour would be dried, it would be crushed up, and it would be infused with a really high quality, hand-picked, hand-pressed olive oil. It would be put into glass vases or marble vases, alabaster if you will, or some other mineral, or into wooden kegs. Then it would be shipped all the way from India, Nepal, that area to the east, all the way to Rome. This was a very expensive oil that was used by the elite in Rome. Well, it would stop along the way, and communities that could afford it would have small businesses that would start that would take these oils in large vats and put them into smaller vials or vases, something like this right here. And that's probably something like about 5 inches tall that this woman takes and breaks and pours over Jesus' head. Now, that particular vial, you can't maybe see it, it would have a lid on it, and it would be sealed with wax to keep it from spilling, to keep it from evaporating or from spoiling. She has this in her home for some reason, and it's very expensive. I don't know how much you would be willing to pay for 1 ounce of perfume, but I, on one occasion, bought 3.4 ounces of Oscar de la Renta perfume for Alfie, because I'm that grand a husband, for $60. That's a big number for me. It really is. Only to get it home and realize that it was Oscar de la Renta eau de toilette. That's toilet water. That's really literally what that translates. I realized I just spent $60 on toilet water. Next time, I'm just going to the toilet. And I'll get a bucket of it for her. It's a lot cheaper. Like, my goodness, that was so expensive. So you find her with this vial of expensive perfume, and it appears that what she does with it shocks everybody in the room. What does she do with it? Well, she pours it over, she breaks it and pours it over Jesus' head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Actually, the indignant was they howled with grief. They're really upset. Or it sounded like you sound like when someone has seriously hurt you. You squeal. So they're really upset with her. Why waste such expensive perfume, they asked. It could be sold for, and here's the market value of this vial of perfume, for a year's wages. Now, just do a quick family income assessment of your family. Some of you just completed your taxes, so you know the number. Imagine that is what you spent on a vial of perfume. But before you go and spend it, contact someone from NerdWallet or your Charles Schwab financial advisor and ask them, we're about to spend a whole year of wages on some perfume. Good investment? Probably get advised not to do that. It was likely that this woman was a single woman, and in the first century, to be a single woman meant you were naturally impoverished. You were, because you didn't have somebody that was going to come and support you. It was a male-dominated world, and so you likely lived hand to mouth with zero hope of saving enough money for an item such as this. You see, this wasn't just like a year's income in that sense for her. It was a year of what you could save to be enough to pay for yourself for a year. So it would take, if she ever could do it, an incredibly long time for her to save money for this. This is a part of what most commentators and historians would say. It's unlikely that she bought it herself. It's likely handed down to her as a family heirloom, and it is extremely valuable to her. It's probably the most valued thing that she owns in all of the world. It may actually have been what she was leaning on for her just-in-case scenario if something goes bad for her. If there's a financial disaster that strikes, emergency fund, if you will. It's her retirement fund. And she cashes it all in a moment of time, breaks this over Jesus' head, and pours it over him. But it wasn't just the value of what she did that would have caught the attention and created the howls of those in the room. It was that she spilled it all out. Surely she could have just unsealed the top and dipped it on her thumb and put it on Jesus' head. Like a little dab will do you, right? Or maybe just a spritz. Wouldn't that have been enough? Why do you have to pour the whole thing out and break the container? There's no way to put it back together again. It's gone. It's all gone. It cannot be recovered. It wasn't just the value of it. It was that it was all gone. And they thought it was a waste. And so the folks in the circle, they howl with anger. Verse 5 says it could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor. So they scoffed her harshly. That's like they snorted like an enraged animal. You know, when I read this, I wondered to myself, they make the suggestion that the proceeds, if she had sold it, could be used to help the poor. And on one hand, you'd think that's such a magnanimous gesture. That's a really good thing to suggest. And yet, I'm not so sure that was what they were thinking. I don't know this. It doesn't say it. But I'm wondering if they looked at that like you and I might look at it and go, I would never have done that with that. I wouldn't have wasted it. I would have used it. Oh, I would have used it on people who are less fortunate than me. That's for sure what I would have used it on. I wonder if they weren't a lot like us, who look at that and go, I wouldn't waste it. I'd use it on myself, is what I would do with it. Jesus replies to whatever the reason for that, saying that is, Jesus replies, he says, leave her alone. Why criticize? Why beat her up? Why abuse her for doing such a good thing? It's a beautiful thing. It's an outward expression of something really good inside of her. There's a wonderful motive inside of her that caused her to do it. There's inner good. It's noble. It's honorable. It's worthy. And she did this to me. Why do you hassle her over it? In other words, get off her back. She has done something not practically all that good, not all that useful in that sense, but it's absolutely beautiful and it's good and it reflects how good she is. So get off her back. If it had just been useful or practical gesture, it's unlikely Jesus would have said this. You see, perfumes were typically used, or these fragrant oils were used as deodorant. That's what they were used for. You know, people's body odor stinks. Some of you might want to check that out. Yeah. And so what they would do, they didn't have secret, like the secret deodorant, and they didn't have Old Spice. That's good. They didn't have that. They had these fragrant oils that they would put on. And if it had just been a useful gesture, Jesus might well have said, hey, thanks. Was I smelling? Thanks for the perfume to cover that up. But it's not. It's not the good that he's talking about. He says that you'll always have the poor among you, and you can help them. You should help them. You're obligated to help them whenever you want to, but you will not always have me. I found it interesting. One of the commentators that I read this last week said, I wonder if Jesus had been in any other town other than Bethany, whether he would have said this like this, because he was a huge proponent of helping the poor and the impoverished and the sick and the orphans and the widows. But if Bethany really was that city of refuge, that the only people that lived there were the poor and the sick, they were marginalized completely by the Jewish society. And I wonder if that wasn't maybe what they were going to be as a city going forward. And maybe Jesus is just referring to that reality. Hey, look, this is a city of refuge. It's where people from the city come to when they're kicked out of the city and they need some help and they're going to find their way here. So people who are hurt and poor, they're going to continue to find their way here, but I'm only going to be around for a few more days. And so what she has done, though she doesn't know what she's doing, she's done something cosmic here. She has done something to prepare me for what is going to happen. And now that she has poured this oil, she's anointed me. The die has been cast. There's no turning back. What's going to happen now is going to happen. This is the launching point for that. There is no going back. Just like that oil cannot be put back in that broken vial, there is no going back. I am going to the cross. I am going to suffer. I am going to die. This is a cosmic symbol of something that can never be undone. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. It's a unique thing. And it's a very good thing that she has done. If you arrived a little early, you saw our 6 in 60 seconds. And I was asked on that what my favorite family vacation was. And I remembered at that time a bungee jumping deal that Elfie and I did on one of our vacations. Now, it's interesting thing. There is a moment in time when you bungee jump, at least our experience, where they strap you up to a harness, and there's hopefully the appropriate bungee cord, and you stand on the edge of a platform 200 feet above the gorge with your heels back over in midair, and there's a guy holding onto your harness like this with a very sinister smile, and he starts counting from 3. 3, 2, 1, and he tells you, I'm going to let you go, and you push back as hard as you can. So he counts down 3, 2, 1, and he lets go, and you push. There is no turning back. You cannot crawl back up on that platform. That bungee cord is either going to hold you or it's not going to hold you. Do you get the sense of the moment that Jesus is talking about? There's no turning back. This is now, the die has cast. I tell you the truth, because of what she's done in verse 9, I tell you the truth, because it's such a big deal. Wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed, just like it is on March the 6th of 2021 at a church in Peoria, Arizona. So let's remember what she's done. And this is the application for you and me. You know, I really doubt that this woman understood this deeper and cosmic meaning that Jesus was speaking to in that moment. Maybe later in the week she would, when the horror of what is about to unfolds. If you know something else, I don't think she wanted anything back from Jesus when she broke that vial over his head and spilled out all of its contents. I don't think it really mattered to her all that much what other people thought of her. I don't think it mattered to her how lavish they thought, or how lavish it was, or excessive or extravagant, or how they howled or they were angry. I just don't think it bothered her. I don't think it had an effect on her, because this unrestrained, uncontrolled love expression was very personal for her as it was expressed to Jesus. You see, when we begin to see Jesus beyond any benefit to us, when we begin to see him not for what he does for us, can I say, not even for what he has done for us, though that is the cosmic gift of all. But when we stop seeing him as that, when we stop seeing him for what he will do for us, give us, teach us, free us from, heal us from, provide for us, make a way for us, but we simply see him for who he is, we actually no longer feel we have to pay him back for something that he's done, nor do we have to ask him for anything more. We just are amazed at his ridiculous mercy and grace that's already been given us, and we simply pour out our lives for him without much thought for ourselves. In fact, little thought for ourselves. You see, that's what makes our relationship with him transformative, not transactional. It's not a negotiation with him. If you really know him, if you know how wonderful he is, if you know what it means to have experienced freedom from the responsibility and the guilt of your sin, and not just because he sprinkles magic dust, but because he goes to a cross and gives his life for you and he suffers and dies, and you see who he is, that he's the God of the whole universe, not another man who dies, who's executed, but he's the God of the whole universe who comes to us out of love for us, gives his life for us because he loves us, not asking us for something back in that sense, but offering us something better than we could ever give him. When you see him like that, it's transformative. It's not transactional anymore. God, I will if you. Because you did, I will. It's something that's captured this woman's heart and her mind and her thinking. It's like she's not even conscious of herself. She just has this thing of great value. She can't think of anything better to do with it. I don't think she's calculating it. I don't think she's going to think how impressed Jesus is with it or the blessing she gets back. She just can't think of anything else to do with it. She breaks it and pours it out, all of it, completely on Jesus. Because of this transformative work, this gospel humility, as C.S. Lewis calls it. Gospel humility. You know what the gospel is, right? It's the good news report that God came into our world as a human being without leaving his deity behind. Was a great model and example for us, but that's not why he came. He came to actually give his life on a cross so that our sin, our rebellion, our waywardness could be paid for and we could have a relationship with God established through what he did. That's the good news. And when that grabs you, there is a humility that goes with that. If you've ever read C.S. Lewis's most famous book called Mere Christianity, you'll come to this part of it at the end of a chapter that he writes about pride and human ego. He says, if we were to meet a truly humble person, we would never come away from meeting them thinking they were humble. They would not always be telling us that they were a nobody, because a person who keeps saying that they are a nobody is actually a self-obsessed person. The thing that we would remember from meeting a truly gospel humble person is how much they seem to be totally interested in us. Because the essence of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself or thinking less of myself. It's thinking of myself less. Gospel humility is not needing to think about myself, not needing to connect things with myself. It's an end to thoughts such as, I'm in the room with these people. Does that make me look good? Do I want to be here? True gospel humility means I stop connecting every experience, every conversation with myself. In fact, I stop thinking about myself. The freedom of self-forgetfulness, the blessed rest that only self-forgetfulness brings. Let me summarize it this way. The essence of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself or thinking less of myself. It's thinking of myself less. And as I think of this woman and what she did, I don't think she was thinking of herself. I think she was thinking, this is all I have. This is what I want. I give it to him. It's not transactional. I want nothing back from him. And when we live in that way, there is a path and a pace to life that is attractive, and it's what we want. It's what we long for. And I think it's no mistake that Mark and Peter, though the event may have happened before this, they shove it to the middle of the week because they want to communicate, this is what we have available to us. That cosmic idea of a life with Jesus that's transformative. It's not a negotiated deal. It's transformative of how he changes us. There's one other character that this story ends with, and it's Judas Iscariot. He's identified in verse 10 and 11. It says, then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted when they heard why he had come, and they promised to give him money. So he began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. This is the antithesis of this woman. Judas had a relationship with Jesus for himself. And when Jesus didn't give him what he wanted, he sold Jesus out. What a remarkable woman this is, whose name we don't know. Maybe it's Mary, maybe it's not. About 3 months ago or so, I try to spend some time every morning alone with Jesus in my office, and it's become just the most important time of my day. And sometimes it's longer, and sometimes it's shorter, and sometimes I spend time in that environment. I read my Bible, and or I will pray, or I'll listen to worship music, whatever it might be. And sometimes my heart is moved, and can I tell you, sometimes it isn't. But about 4 months ago, I was kneeling in front of my couch. And, every once in a while, I get this kind of inner voice or this inner sense, and I'm never courageous enough to know for sure. Like, this is Jesus speaking to me. I'm very careful to say that. But as sure as I am, that would have been one of those occasions. And as I was kneeling there, I had this thought in my mind. Hey, Brad, the great story of my glory, of my death and resurrection, stop using it for yourself. Stop using it for your own glory. You see, I'm so privileged to be able to open the Bible every week with you and to share the story of Jesus and to share what he's done and to do that. And frankly, sometimes I can go sit back down there and go, boy, that was really good. And that's for my glory. And I read the story of this woman this week and I go, Jesus, I want to be like her. I really do. Where I just, don't you? Just pour what you have out. Don't count it. Don't measure it. Just because he's so good, because he's so great, he's so right all the time, and he's with us all the time. Just to, without thinking the cost, without thinking, just pour it out. There's something so beautiful about that. So could I encourage you, could I ask you to think, if the needle pointed one way to use Jesus for yourself or just pour yourself out, where would the needle point? If it's not pointing here, have a conversation with him and invite him into that place. Now, Jesus, you know our hearts and our thoughts. You read those and you're interested in them, and you involve yourself with them, and you have this wonderful ability to be like a good friend and to come alongside and go, hey, I've got something more. I've got something else. I know what you want. So Jesus, tonight, would you read our thoughts? Might we be among those who leave the transactional relationship aside and just look for that transformative wonder of who you are to us. May we know you more and more. To that end, Jesus, we'll be grateful for what you do, even in this moment now. Amen.